all of us trying to find common ground, right? It says this is from a wonderful book called How to Solve. It's basically about how to solve wicked problems. It says wicked and wise. Hold on, I'm going to get rid of the recording thing. How to solve the world's toughest problems. And it starts with a meta theory is created by studying other theories. It covers much more of reality than any single, partial, individual, limited theory, each of which tends to just take one perspective or looks only at one particular dimension of reality and ignores others. Or it uses just one method for discovering truth and denies reality to all others, or otherwise takes a limited, narrow, partial, you get the point. He's basically saying if you don't look at the whole picture, then our view of reality is more of a slice of the pie. And the most perfect example that we're beginning to see emerge in our global village or cross-culturally is the Indigenous community. And that's a great example of how it's hard to step outside your worldview, right? Because when we look in those cultures, when we participate or go see what's going on, they're not seeing I and we as separate, nor it, whatever object we're looking at, the tree, the cat, etc., nor it's the entire infrastructure, the earth, the societies we live in. That's an integrated whole in their community. Now, they may not have separated the I as the individual, which we've really done a great job of in the West, coming from the philosophical tradition of Greece and Rome right the way through a lot of what we've done, particularly with psychology. I just cannot believe how strong the psychological mindset, if we could say Freud or Jung or whatever, but just the study of oneself inside oneself has just become a huge part of how we see the world in the West. And there's some great advantages to that. We can grow through trauma and so on. But if that's our primary lens, it's very me focused. And yes, we need to understand ourselves. We need to understand why we feel unhappy. But frankly, sometimes if I don't have enough to do, I feel unhappy. And when I actually step into relating with people, communicating, they call it relationality now, I believe, then I hope I'm bringing this back to your question.
You are, you
Basically,
are.
okay, basically that's where we can begin to see the advantage of standing in someone else's shoes and really, wow, that's such a cool way to see the world. And then to begin to see, wow, maybe I'm stuck in my perspective. So it's not about being hard on yourself or self-critical or like, wow, we're so bad here in the West, we've done such evil things. It's more about understanding the patterns that are happening such that we can choose different patterns. We can become aware and become intentional rather than just receiving whatever we've unconsciously adapted to in our upbringing.
I like that. I like that. Something that really stood out in what you just said there too is a lot of times when we reflect on ourselves, we do reflect on ourselves um, uh, as ourselves, not looking at ourselves and sort of weighing um, our relation with others or looking at ourselves as with relations as well. So I love how you connect that because that's very important. Next question here is growing beyond this. Actually, let me ask Rick's question. So when you are engaging in learning experiences, what do you most enjoy setting up about consciousness and reflexivity as far as relating to see these connections?
Oh, wow. What a fun question. All right. So I'm presuming that consciousness is a lot more prevalent than we believe. Like in my presumption, which may or may not ever be proven. Well, let me start here, Rick. I start with a presumption. I start with a presumption and then I begin to test everything I'm learning against that presumption. So, um, just like light is manifest, is matter and energy, and we live in the realm of light, if we're really thinking about it. I mean, Einstein's theory of relativity has never filtered down to how we treat each other and how we see the world in terms of our socialization, in terms of what we do as human beings, but it's quite profound. It's like saying, "Hey, we're all particles and waves." So if we can begin to feel that in terms of before we think, before we speak, just, oh, that's wild. And then we begin to engage. With consciousness, I have been just delighted by the new, by a lot more coverage of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, entanglement. And I suppose if you were not familiar with it, there's a wonderful talk by Federico Fagin, Faggin, and a lot of these guys, Penrose and so on, that are really trying to scientifically prove if consciousness exists. So I take the presumption that consciousness is a substrate, that it is just, it is another side of the coin. There's a sphere, consciousness and light. And then as I study, I write in the margins like crazy. So I'm constantly having an ongoing argument and really absorbing the perspectives. We did a class on consciousness where I read 500 pages of every theory that is scientifically like a progression of how it has been scientifically acceptable to consider consciousness. Um,
Let me tie this into the next one then. So the next question actually ties right into this. So you make the distinction that worldview is not just about what we believe, but the structure through which we make meaning. So as you're evaluating this, can you unpack it as far as like how you build that meaning for yourself or
Sure.
work through that?
So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call upon the work of Ken Wilber, and he is just one perspective. You know, there's indigenous perspectives where they're embodied. They're just cluing into something that we're trying to intellectually understand. And of course, in the East, they're really into consciousness, and it's been going on for millennia in Buddhism, in Taoism, which is like one's about letting go of ego completely, and the other is about Taoism's about nature. But I thought that this was a great discovery because I had been trying to figure out, well, why don't people get along? What the heck is going on here? And how come if we wanted, say, a universal ethics, why would it never work, right? And so there was in this book here, Integral Psychology, and it's pretty thick, but it also has some really cool ideas. It's called Integral Psychology, Consciousness, Spirit, Psychology, and Therapy. And it is the thing here, it says the first truly comprehensive map of the human mind by Ken Wilber. So let me just say that we're going to briefly discuss 8 levels. And these 8 levels just really look at how people and tribes or societies where they place their interest, where they place their truth, and what power these groups or ideologies hold right now globally when we look at the dominant culture in terms of the population and in terms of how much power that population has to determine the future. So, for example, if you're a regenerative ecosystem person, there's not a lot of us. There's 15% power and 10% of the population. Let's start from the very bottom. Level 1 is basically archaic and instinctual. Level 2 is magical and animistic. Level 3 is power and gods. Level 4 is conformist in a rule-based society. Level 5 is science and achievement. Level 6 is ecological sensitivity, networking against hierarchy. Level 7 and 8 is where he is saying that you can step outside of your beliefs or your worldview and begin to see multiple worldviews, multiple perspectives, and be okay with that. Now, Sage and I discussed that you might be predominantly living in one worldview, but in any given moment, we can fall into the first one, what he calls level 1, where you have 0% power. So anyway, there's survival, and I think, does that make sense in terms of what you would ask, Sage?
Yeah, yeah. I think in what you're saying, just to sort of regurgitate some of this back, is based on the levels of what you discuss, which I'm trying to find a good link to put in chat, guys. I don't have one yet, but I will find a good link for you to share that. I think what you're saying is the structure in which we make meaning, a lot of times we don't see because we don't know in which we're at and what we're trying to absorb. By understanding where we are with a certain topic, we can know what we need to unpack to get to that next level, right? And start to expand our thought. Is that kind of where you're going with this?
Yeah, Wilbur basically feels that it's a progression and that you have
Okay.
to, have a certain level of understanding to even be able to see the next level. And I've been testing that recently with a friend of mine who is kind of a mentor. He's a top lawyer in California. He actually wrote fundamental corporate code that changed the structure of business around the country. And he's been my friend forever. And so he's coming from an achievement orientation where science and money and corporate structuring that kind of underpins our entire global system right now is the reality in which he lives. And I'm saying, well, what about, what about stepping beyond that to looking at alternative ways to structure economy so that we can include those of us who are saying, hey, climate change is a really big deal. And the feedback I'm getting from him and others in the financial industry is it's money is, well, we are all citizens of money in essence. He didn't say that, but money is so prevalent. It is, in fact, in one of the deschooling dialogues on Cosmos, and I don't mean to jump around, but there was this fundamental aha I got when I was listening to one of them. The guy's name is, I think, Orlando, Bishop Orlando, and he said, money is the only common language. It's a global common language. So how do you step beyond that? Because there's a lot of us that see that we have some very big changes to make very rapidly. Something like Wilbur's perspective allows me to say, oh, when my friends is going to the Broncos game and they just think it's so cool, maybe they're like working in more of a tribal perspective, or when someone is like super clear that we can make all the differences in the world. And I just love Brian's von Herzen's perspective. He is coming from the most innovative level of science and energy and structure. And then when I'm talking to someone who says, this is all an illusion, what are we doing? There is consciousness beyond all of this. I'm like, okay, well, that person is living in perhaps more of an Eastern perspective. Right on, we have to have that perspective, but they're going to get flattened unless we're able to really integrate more clearly. So I guess the point of this system, and there are other maps, there are all other systems. Remember, this is a map. This isn't truth. It is a way of looking at different world views.
Mhm.
The goal is to get to, hey, there's an entire spectrum here. I get it. There's multiple perspectives, and we need to step back and see the whole picture. We need to realize that by listening, by becoming more aware, we can have much richer conversations.
I love that. Love that. With that, when you find someone who changes or moves from my worldview is reality to I can see my worldview as my own reality, what kind of changes do you see in those people? Like you're talking to someone, a mentor about this right now. Have you shared this with others and have you seen sort of that paradigm shift with how they sort of view themselves?
It's a good question. And I don't think it happens magically. I think it happens through true love, or at least through true understanding that the person in front of you is, you connect. So the perfect example is my husband. I mean, seriously, he was the polar opposite. All the things that he came from were things that I didn't believe in, that were opposite to my worldview, right? And yet our connection was so deep that I started to realize that my spiritual, social snobbery, my, hey, I've got the truth and you poor ego, you're just going to suffer, which was really cultic of me. I started to realize that he had a lot of wisdom, like a human wisdom. He could feel what it's like to suffer and to care about people suffering and to be compassionate about their at that and to go the extra mile to kind of preconceive all the scenarios that could happen and make intentional choices that are not just for his benefit, but were for the benefit of large groups. Um, does that answer your question? Is there more? I think
It
there's a little
does. It
bit more
does.
there. I just don't know how to
It's a good
react.
example of a person across the table, but like when someone is starting to sort of self-measure their own worldview, do you notice
Mm.
any big shifts in the way the person does respond?
Oh yeah, it's super fun. So I took a class on emotional intelligence and I'm like, oh well, I'm not that intelligent. The first thing is about interest. Interest. And I'm like, oh wow. So that's where I spend most of my time is learning about interest. And what I would say is when we begin to realize, when we can think about how we're thinking, when we can kind of put a space, a gap between the stimulus and then we pause and then we like notice what's going on and then we respond. That really shows a growth in a willingness, a tolerance, an interest in in diversity, in learning about different perspectives. And I think that's super important, particularly today. And this does kind of circle back a little bit to the Hindu dude who came to America. It was the first Parliament of World Religions. It was 1893. He took a boat over here. He ended up on the streets of Chicago. An intelligentsia woman sent him to Harvard. Harvard said, wow, this guy has more knowledge than our entire religion department put together. You have to allow him to speak at the World Parliament. This is the first Parliament of World Religions. It was at the Chicago World Fair, which, by the way, 1/3 of Americans visited the Chicago World Fair during that 6 month period. It's quite extraordinary. And what he argued for is unity and diversity. He said all different spiritual pathways are purposed with the same goal. And therefore, it's not about going to one religion or another. It's not about you converting to someone else's worldview versus your worldview. It's just about saying, hey, we have different worldviews. And when we step back and notice that, we're able to listen much more clearly with an open mind rather than already jumping into, oh, they're talking about this. I have an opinion on this. This is my next point.
Yes, I love that. So with that, you've suggested that the goal is not to have the right worldview, but to hold any worldview more lightly and hold space for that.
Sure.
What does that look like in practice? Because that's a lot harder said than done. What?
Well, the first step is to realize that to self-recognize, okay, I do have a worldview. So anytime I'm going to have an opinion and I'm going to have real beliefs and ideas and values, um, I'm going to step back here again and say, with the kind of the polarized culture I see in America right now, we may have similar values, but we're just so in language, so in dialogue with different we're saying the same words, but they could mean radically different things, as we spoke about last week, and I think the next two podcasts are going to be about that as well. So it's really about self-observation, just being taking that moment to go, hey, I'm going to come out with what I believe in, but it's really important to listen to other people. I kind of repeated myself. Ask your question one more time and make sure that I have answered what I want to say.
So the question was, you've suggested that the goal is to not have the right worldview, but to hold any real worldview more lightly. What does that look like in practice? And I think you got there. I think
Yeah,
you did.
it's
I think
humility,
that
but it's
pause
also
was a big
humor.
part.
It's really humor, like laughter and the ability to see yourself doing things, to have that self-awareness, to even ask yourself. Some people talk about it as self-reflection, and then they say, well, the higher level of that is self-inquiry rather than just how do I become a better person? Who is the person that's doing this? So that can tie into more of the spirituality, but in terms of regeneration, I suppose I'd say it starts from within. Who we are inside becomes what we do outside. And so being willing to really observe yourself is important. I watched this wonderful podcast. It was on a channel called Stoa, and the title is Consciousness Accomplishment, Integrating Spiritual Development and Worldly Achievement. And in brief, you had this super successful 30-something year old who, as you often hear, They get to a certain point and they feel, what is my life worth? Why am I doing this? And where is it going to end? And so he began to be a spiritual seeker. And the part about this that I loved is he took the time to notice every time he judged. So he went through a 2 or 3 month super intensive process of self-observation. Why am I judging that? Oh, if I'm judging how much they put on their looks, is that because I want to do that as well, or I tend to do that as well? And he went through minusculely every day, writing it down, seeing what he was doing. And he found at the end of that that he was a much more rested, balanced person who could live in the present. So each of our path is going to be different,
Mhm.
but just being aware that we're doing this instead of just acting it out, we're like, oh, that's part of what I do. I'm thinking about my thinking. I'm aware that I'm doing something. We have an amazing brain. I mean, we have this gift. It's a unique human gift of looking at the past and looking at the future. So then, knowing that to be the case, how do I live in the present? How do I stop and be here and just go, wow, it's worth noticing what's going on right here, right now, and engaging that without an agenda.
I love that. I love that. That was a great answer, and you actually answered like the next question as well. So I love this. I'm looking through chat real quick to make sure there's no questions. We have some people pop in. Guys, I'm pasting that link back in there over and over again as new people come in. I'm not trying to spam you. I'm going to move on to the next one here. So you've pointed to self-distancing, excuse me. You've pointed to self-distancing as the space between the stimulus and the response. So that's that space in between. How do we begin practicing that kind of awareness in real time? You kind of hit this a
Mm,
little bit, but
mm.
both of these are around practicing awareness. So if you kind of had the best practice for even getting into this, albeit you self-describe this a little different for each one of us, how would you sort of lay that out?
I read a great book in which it was described, and it was tied back to the work of Viktor Frankl, in which the basic teaching is observe the stimulus, pause, and then respond. So that's super simple. Hey, it's coming at me. I'm sure I'm gonna like figure out what I want to say about it, or wow, I already have what I'm gonna say about it in my head. Why am I saying that? What was the situation, not my judgment? And this is basic social intelligence. Goldman or Goldberg's done a lot with this. There's a beautiful book by Rosenberg that's really looking at um, how we create society together, keeping it really simple. I stop, I see why I'm reacting, I breathe, and then I respond from a centered place.
Mhm.
So in your guys' culture, in terms of regeneration, I saw something pop up on the chat. I have been listening to a whole bunch of different platforms. I was assigned to look at, 30 or so different publications, creators, and so on within the ecosystem of Cosmos Journal where I was published, right? And then
Mhm.
I jumped into this community. And yes, last week I listened to every single thing. We just need to be aware that whatever we are so passionate about, we can't make someone else the villain. So we can't just wipe out corporations. We can't wipe out the ecosystem. We can't wipe, I mean, the human ecosystem. I actually have to have a car to drive to work, right? I need my kid to go to school. And all of this is so interlinked that we need to listen with compassion and discernment, rather than making someone a villain or thinking that we're right and they're wrong, to just become a little bit more capable of our wise self, our best self. And that wise self isn't based on knowledge. Wisdom is not directly linked to like more knowledge. Wisdom is something where we recognize it like, wow, that was a wise moment. I worked together with these people and we accomplished something that none of us might have thought was possible. And we did it through integrity and we did it with, with yes, the structure of how you do that from a business perspective, but with real integrity and principles that were determining how we went about our daily business.
I love that. I love that. All right. So, Our guy here, Tristan in chat, gave us three at once. So I'm going to give you all three, and then we'll come
Okay.
back and do one at a time. All right. So the first one, I'll read through the whole thing and we'll come back. So, can anyone reach that level of consciousness? Is there an age or a context in which offers the least amount of friction to that journey? Are there specific questions or environmental factors, being in nature, that guide the journey most effectively? So, let's go into the first one. Can anyone reach that highest level of consciousness, level eight, for a topic or a subject?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's actually the birthright of all humanity. It's built into our intuition. It's built into moments of awakening. There are certain people who may come to this world already kind of predisposed to that awakening. Generally, they are have become our spiritual icons, Jesus, Zoroaster, uh, the Buddha, and so on. So there are guides who actually, I believe, do more than just give us a Bible. They actually transmit a certain level of openness. And if you look at the Federico Fagin video, what I liked about that is it wasn't directly related to a spiritual teacher. It was something where he just happened to awaken to it. So I think there's a couple things here, Tristan. There's like endless stuff within religion, philosophy, spirituality about this type of awakening. And the path is different for everyone. I think the presumption that that consciousness is a substrate would be a radical departure from where we're at now. And it's already on the table. It's just we don't live in the quantum world. So, yes, we probably have all of this entanglement and space-time um, being different than we're experiencing here. But consciousness is the birthright of everyone. Yes, everyone can realize it. It's a process. It doesn't happen instantaneously. You have to intend to get there.
Is there an age or context in which offers the least amount of friction for that to support that journey?
I think that there's historically a lot of people have a radical change in their life direction around the age of 30. I don't know why that happens. It's just I've seen that in some of the history of wise teachers as well as in my own life. Some people are born with that, Tristan, and I believe when we're young, we actually are much more psychically dilated to it. There's a lot of research going on about intelligences now, non-human intelligence, human intelligence, artificial intelligence, nature intelligence. And I'm not going to go into it now, but yes, there is that opening when we're little. We go through a whole cultural process, and then some people choose to pursue that as a significant area of attention at some point in their life. And that's not age-based, that's spirit-based, I think.
Are there specific questions or environmental factors, such as being in nature, that sort of help or support that journey most effectively?
Mm. Uh, so nature is a big one for people in the West, and also if you look at the teachings of Taoism, a lot of people who were born in different religious traditions, as I went through study, they all love Taoism because it's about nature itself. It is about being in flow with life, without your mind. And there was this fabulous guy at Tufts who decided he wanted to become a martial artist, and he went over there and he got smashed because he did no martial arts, but then he went on this motorcycle journey all around. It was fabulous. My husband's not into any of this stuff. He listened to that and he's like, wow, that was an awesome podcast. So I'll see if I can get that. Maybe you can put that up somewhere. Um,
Yeah.
Specifically, yeah, nature seems
You
to.
can also take an action item as well. There's Martha said there's a whole slew of videos on Frederico Fagans. And so if you could possibly help direct as well, if we can research that and point them to the videos that you're talking about on some of these talks, that
There's
will
one
also
that came out. It came out in January of last year, and it was with the Essentia Foundation. His story is that he was one of the fundamental people in the Silicon Valley. He actually he created some chip or other. So he'd already again achieved what he wanted to achieve. So he gives a great story. You could look it up. The story is repeated multiple times in terms of his various videos. Look for the one in January where he talks about his heart opening, where he fully understood that consciousness is within us and outside us, and he could see both of them at the exact same time. Um, I like nature and animals because they're not full of mind. They're able to just communicate how to be present. They're in communion. And so nature is where I spend a lot of my time, Tristan. Got a backyard filled with squirrels and cats and birds and dogs, and they all play together. It's really, really fun.
Thank you so much, Tristan. Great questions. Um, I'm not seeing any other questions that I need to ask right now. Rick, you have one for a follow-up for people. So if there's any more questions you guys want to ask, we are in our last 5 minutes. So Tally, we're going to do a little bit of a speed fire here. If we are always helping to create the world we live in through interpretation, meaning making, and relationship, what responsibility does that place on us?
Hmm. So I'm gonna tell you a couple things and then I'm going to come to my answer. I was giving my son a really hard time, right, about his being a teenager. And I like didn't talk to him for a few days and he must have felt that. And so he was asking me, he goes, Mom, I kind of see that we're all like colors and we paint the world. And I thought, wow, that's super cool. Another just basic teaching that I grew up with is when you are alive, you make mind. And when you die, mind makes you. So that context, whether it's true or not, I keep that in mind because I don't want to be necessarily floating in wherever I am in the afterlife with a bunch of trash in my head. But in terms of how we can do this better together, I feel like having these types of conversations is essential so that we become aware of this. And then once we realize, hey, I have a worldview, hey, maybe I'm not tolerant of other people's worldview, we are willing to listen. And when we really listen, we can connect with people. And when we connect with people, we naturally feel who they are, feel their worldview before we put all the words on top of it. So,
I love
worldview
it.
is a conscious choice, and if we remember that, we can be more conscious about our choices.
I love it. Nick, if you have a quick question, we'll go ahead and weave you in, my friend. I don't normally. Go ahead. Jump on in. You're on mute, though, just so you know.
Okay, can you hear me?
I sure can, yeah.
Great,
Yes, sir.
fantastic.
Oh, you did
Then you
mute
went on
yourself
mute
again,
again.
Nick. Hold on. Hold on. We got to the juicy stuff right as you muted
Ah,
yourself again.
I don't
Go
know
ahead.
how
You're
that
good.
happened. Okay, here we go. Can can we, using computational cognition in a global AI that can displace sort of this war economy money language that is so universal with a compassion Taoist ontology epistemology? Is that even possible?
You have to be able to hold multiple truths at the same time. So, for example, I believe it is. It's just if people with money actually feel safe enough to step back from that. When do you have enough money, right? Is it interesting to you? I believe that the AI's, I am pro AI. I think that there's all kinds of ways it can be misused, but as a tool, it can be extraordinary. Um, one more point about that to hold multiple truths. Yes, with AI. Oh, and then as we get these multiple perspectives hitting the mainstream, because we are a global village, we are actually interconnected through the internet. So my kid might be TikToking along and boom, for some weird reason, quantum physics things pop up or, multiple dimensions pop up. So I believe, yes, we can. And I believe it takes a little work and cooperation, tolerance. I mean, we have to be open-minded. Otherwise, we're just going to get the same thing we're doing now.
Thank you. Good
Thank you,
answer.
Nick.
Mhm.
Thank you, Tally. Last two questions. These are our closing questions, everyone. And we will stay on for just a few minutes, just so everyone knows before we kick these last few
Hmm.
questions. We had a little bit of an adjustment next week on the 1st of April, well, April Fool's Day. We have our own Rick Bathello coming on here. I'm not going to tell you guys the topic because we're kind of flushing this out a little bit and seeing what it's going to be about, but it's going to be on the same subjects here. And then the week after, we'll have Anthony Upwards come back again for his second session, guys. So, last couple of questions, Tally. What's the one question about worldview or communication you wish more people were asking right now?
Do I have one? Like how deep is my worldview? Because people, am I misunderstanding it? I guess for me, people need to be looking that my worldview isn't just my perspective. It's actually what I swim in. It's time, it's space, um, it's it's the fun. It's that I look at problem and solution. It's that I am using language, but maybe my language only speaks to 1/10 of what I'm really feeling. It's um, yeah, what is behind the idea of worldview and how can I kind of delve deeper so I get out of the concept of it and into the feeling and heart of it.
I love that. I love that. Last question, and then we're going to sing Rick happy birthday. Everyone warm up your singing voices. I'll give you a warning now. So for people who want to keep learning, where would you point them first?
There's thick books and there's thin books. My favorite, as I told you, is this one, Wicked and Wise, by Alan Watkins and Ken Wilber, How to Solve the World's Toughest Problems. Because this group is looking at regeneration. How do we fix things? And so it has enough of Wilbur stuff in it, but it's looking at things like climate change. It's looking at networks or nodes of communication, and so it's a kind of a cross between a guy, Alan, who goes out and meets with NGOs and governments and major world leaders, and then philosophy. So this is number one. The Web of Meaning is fantastic. It is revolutionary. It goes from like the whole history of where we began with money. How did money end up where it is today, and what are we going to do about it? And it just provides a very straightforward, non-intellect, like non-academic way of understanding the options that we have in front of us and the choices we should make to get there.
Love it. Love it.
Oops.
All right, everyone. That concludes our interview. We did it. We're at the end of it all. We're going to stay on for just a few minutes where we can ask our own open questions. So as always, we'll get to Tally's questions and y'all can come off a mute and just sort of talk amongst yourselves. But before we do that, if you guys don't mind, come on camera real quick and let's sing happy birthday to our very own Mr. Rick, the man, the myth, the legend, the one who always carries us forward on the knowledge journey and deep thoughts. Rick, we love you. We appreciate you. And happy birthday
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 to
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 you.
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 Happy
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 birthday
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 to
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 you.
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 Happy
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 birthday,
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 dear
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 Rick.
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 Happy
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 birthday
birthday
to
birthday
to
to
you.
you. And I
you.
love it. You can see
and
who has
and
delays on
you.
there too, because we're all just a little out of sync. It was the best ever. Rick, we're so glad you're here. Happy birthday, sir. You're a valuable asset to this community, and we're really blessed to have you amongst us. So, guys, that concludes the interview. Come off of mute. You can ask Tally whatever questions you have. Tally has agreed to stay on for a few minutes, but let's not hold her for another hour or so, just in case she needs to get back to her own life. So, please, everyone, come off and floor is yours. Tristan,
I
go ahead.
I just want to make a quick anecdote that my question around nature was a little bit from personal experience that I have a friend who's very conservative, voted for Trump both times, but bless his heart, like he had a really tough upbringing, and I think, he's heavily influenced by his environment and male roles that he's had growing up. And when I'm one-on-one with him, I was talking about environmental context of like, how do you kind of help someone on their journey of consciousness? Um, and I feel like one-on-one experiences in nature with him has been like the most fruitful. Like we've had the best conversations, and I don't know if like my ethos or the my way of thinking or my consciousness is somehow nudging him, or at least opening up his mind to other ways of thinking. I like to think it is, but I've found in those contexts specifically, he's at least the most open to it. A group setting does not work. Um, uh, I like campfires or where there's lack of eye contact, honestly. Hiking, campfires, because I find eye contact too is like people are uncomfortable and they don't step outside themselves when they're making eye contact. So if you're doing something that's either physically exerting or there's nothing for your mind to be distracted by. Um, anyway, just personal anecdote of what
Yeah,
I found helps in having those types of conversations.
sure. Yeah, that's great.
Um,
Um, there's a lot of research right now about embodiment, about getting us out of our heads and into our bodies. And whether that's, in my relationship with my husband, where we did have very different ones. I mean, we were romantic at the beginning. And so that there was that connection that really was where I realized, oh, wow, we are connected regardless of what's in our heads. Uh, and so I'm glad you found that place. And that's the kind of work I'm talking about, where we find commonality, even though we hold really different worldviews. Yeah.
I love the observations too, Tristan, as far as like the non-eye contact or doing something too, so you distract sort of the subconscious as well. I think that's those are all really, really important.
Yeah,
Rick,
I agree. Those are great observations.
go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, having just come from the meeting, and Tristan, I think you were there, and I shared the story about my grandson who's autistic, and we were in Forest Park in Portland, and if I ask him to go for a walk, he won't go. But when when he went to nature, he was just going, listening to the stream, soaking it in. But the caveat I would say, because there was some some differences within the Burning Man event they had there, is that people are different. And I'll give you one example. I have no idea if this is true or not, but I heard it on Healthy Brain. What's his name? The podcast on the brain. But anyway, they said that some people like to walk and talk, and some people don't like to walk and talk.
Mm.
And it's about 50-50, which just shows you that people have preferences. And I think one of the key things is, I put the word metanoia in there because it's a word that a lot of people don't know, and it's the opposite of paranoia, which is being out of your mind with fear. Metanoia is completely different, which is having a profound change in your worldview. And I think there's so many different pathways to that you have to be wary about prescriptive. And I sometimes people hear them talking, well, you got to have an embodied experience. Well, some people do, some people don't. So I think sometimes we get caught up in our own path, so to speak, and we sort of impose it on others without actually paying attention to the fact they want to have trance music. They don't want to sit in nature.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, and And it's wonderful to find out where you connect, you know. This
Exactly,
is where we
exactly.
come back to language, because if I say embodied, right, which is not my word, it's a word I had to learn for school. Well,
Yeah,
what do I mean by that? I might be super embodied when I'm listening to music, or my husband loves driving his car super fast. So yeah, it's finding that place where intimacy is allowed to come to the surface without someone feeling threatened.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a sort of state of being. What's your best state of being in the conditions that you can create so that you can open your mind and we can move out of the stage of paranoia.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Where we feel comfortable breathing too. Beautiful point. I appreciate that.
yeah, because if you're paranoid, your stimulus response is zilch. It's
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
you're just
high emotional reactivity,
Mhm.
and there's no equanimity or no emotional equanimity. So
Sure. Sure.
I'll let somebody else chime in if they want.
Martha, do you want to come chime in?
I was just typing, typing a long one. Hi, Tally.
Hi, pleasure to see
We
you.
just connected. I'm
Yeah.
happy to. I rushed in because I had a meeting before that went over. But anyway, yeah. So I come from the world of textiles and
Mm.
fibers, and I think along the lines of what Tristan has said and Tally, what you've also talked about. I mean, I think a lot about embodied knowledge, tacit knowledge, the things that we know how to do that really go across cultures and
Mm.
generations.
Sure.
And I think of these sort of potential for even wordless activities like gardening, knitting, cooking, doing things, bringing people together. I've always had this sort of fantasy of having an embroidery project with women from the Socialist Party and the Social Volkspartei, which is the extreme right, to get them together, get everybody together with lots of supplies, and we just sit around and we embroider or we knit or we do something. I think it's similar, Tristan, to what you were talking about. You don't talk about politics. You just spend time together being in each other's presence and company. And yeah, I believe that craft and making can heal a lot of divides.
It's
So,
beautiful. And just, I'm a very, I like to be in my head a lot. If we look at right and left brain,
mm.
activities, right brain is fun, when we're not trying, we're not thinking, we're not talking, but we're just participating. It's lovely. It's
I
lovely.
agree. And I think a lot of times embodied activities are often sort of free movement and things that not everybody feels comfortable. Not everybody feels comfortable in their physical body. And
Hmm.
so as soon as it becomes more sort of performative, even if nobody's looking at anybody else, I think that can shut some people down.
Sure.
Whereas just stitching, stitching and bitching, or whatever, not
Yeah.
bitching, stitching and not bitching,
I'd love to hear more
and
about that. I mean,
and
like,
learning from each other, cross generations. I like the idea of grannies teaching, you know, teenagers who aren't learning it in school anymore because there's no more home economics, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'll keep you posted.
yeah, it'd be great to hear about that. Um, I could talk about, I went to see this woman who's an activist from India, and she's been doing it since 1994. And where it landed now is they're working in the community, and their facilitators go and meet with all the men, and then all the women, and then the children, and then the elders. And they ask each group, what do you want to do? And the kids were like, we want to clean up the trash in our environment, right? And now they're all out there doing that. It's a 2.5 year experiment, but what you're coming to is the same thing. Where is our embodied collectivity? And then as we do that together, wow, the world we live in changes not because we're trying to change it, but because we're collectively enjoying something
I
together.
agree. And
Yeah.
I think that also shifts the sense of, instead of telling kids to clean up the trash, um, they feel like they're doing it for somebody else. I remember when we lived in Brooklyn and I would walk through Prospect Park, and depending on it's a huge park, and depending on which neighborhood it was bordering, the quality, the condition of the park was very different. And in some of the more rundown areas, I thought, where there's a lot of graffiti and just vandalism, I thought if somehow the kids could be brought in and shown that it's their park, that it's not the establishment's park, but it's their park, then they might start to have a sense of sort of stewardship and want to take care of it. So it sounds a
Yeah.
bit like that's what you were encountering. And just one last thing, Manish Jain. I don't know. You probably all have heard of Manish Jain, but he is very well educated, very achieved, highly achieved man who realized that the smartest woman he knew was his illiterate grandmother. So
Mhm.
he's all about unschooling, and he
Love
started
it.
these different like prison universities, grandmother universities. He said you just need 5 people and you can start a university. He doesn't call them schools because he feels that university sounds more sort of prestigious. But just because there's so much knowledge, there's so much embodied and just learned experience knowledge that people who don't have degrees have. And a lot of people just don't thrive in an academic setting. And I think more and more academia is becoming a stifling place. So let's all start schools.
Love it. Thank you for sharing, Martha. Nick, did you have any final comments, questions, or anything you'd like to share, sir?
Oh gosh. Just was enjoying the just being out of mind. I forgot the phrasing, but just absorbing all of this. It's just a nice place to not to be not in my mind, but absorbing. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
Happy to
that
be
brings up a really good point. If you don't mind, Tally and I spent like hours trying to figure out what topic you want to talk about because her breadth of knowledge is so wide. Was there anything that like jumped out? You're like, oh my gosh, let's have a session on just that from today that you guys might want to learn more about, and maybe we can have Miss Rhoades come back here and sort of present that on a follow-up. Anything you guys want to see or you heard that you'd love to dive in deeper?
I'm impressed by your voracious reading. It seems that I buy a lot of books, but I don't read a lot of books. And there's a Japanese term for people who buy books but don't read them. I forget what it is, but I would love to join a Tally Rhoades book club. I think that
interesting.
would be really fun. It's overwhelming. Your breadth of and depth of knowledge is a bit over intimidating, but yeah, I would like to just sort of shadow you or follow you or yeah, interact. And a book club could be
I'll give
fun.
you a secret. Before I went back to my master's, I did not read. I mean, I read a lot. As a child, I read everything because of my boarding school. We had nothing to do, so I read. But then 40 years later, I'm like, oh, we're back to reading. And it was really hard at first, really hard. And then I got with the program. So
I
yeah,
guess you learn how to read when you
yeah, you
have to
do.
read hundreds of pages.
Yeah. Well, you can make it really easy. You don't have to have it be a book club of a 500, chapter book. It could be 500-page book. It could be like a chapter. It's the chapter book club if it's thick material, you know?
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I,
Sage, do we have any on, does GRC have any reading groups?
During the winter season when I wasn't interviewing, we were doing that on this session with the book
Okay.
Lean Impact. But that said, of some of the books that Tally brought up, especially the Solving Wicked Problems, and I think all three of them could be their own sessions with just themselves because there's such depth of that topic. I would really enjoy that. So maybe after we finish with Rick and Anthony, maybe we take a few weeks off of interviews and we go back into like just one book and we just sit on it for like a month or so. I'd be totally open to that.
I've just recruited you, Tally.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would love to. It's not like I won't know what I want to talk about or the things that interested me. It's really about a common, what it spurs in each person individually. But like this guy here, I mean, I argue with the book. I'm like, well, what about this and what about that? And why did you think this? And that's interesting. So,
Which one? Which
as you,
one is that?
oh, this one in particular, the web of meaning.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I think everyone that's the culture of a book club. Yeah, okay, we can summarize it, but this sentence, oh,
Um,
that was super curious, or wow, I never thought about it that
I think
way.
we need to do that book then so we can all come in here and argue about it. Because if you're already coming up with that much, think of all the different perspectives within GRC. I think that would be really, really eye-opening, and especially on the thread of worldview and sort of like giving everyone that grace to have their own opinions with that as well. I think it could be really powerful. What do you guys think?
I think so. Exercise our critical thinking
Yeah.
Yes.
muscle, which I find is not really the approach to education in Switzerland. And I was fortunate to go to a small uh, prep school and then a small college, and attendance counted, and how much you participated in class was a big part of the grade. And here it's just lots of big lecture halls and PowerPoints and hundreds of pages of reading and no discussion. So,
What a
but
missed opportunity,
you
huh?
might even be able to get Jeremy Lent to pop in. He's doing some different courses through Gaia, and I find he's a really seems to be quite accessible.
Mm.
Maybe
Yes, I've been attending his Deep Transformation Network, and
Okay.
I mentioned
Yeah.
that I'm working with Cosmos Journal, and they're actually his new book comes out in May, and I know that the editor of Cosmos Journal is reading that. So,
Oh,
who
great.
knows? But definitely,
Yeah.
at least to begin with, it's good to know what he's talking about, and then you
Yeah.
can go, hey, I see he's on a number of different places that I've begun to look into, like a presenter at one point or another. And it would be great
Nice.
to have someone like that on as a guest for Sage.
I think that'd be awesome. We could go through the book first and then bring him on, and he'll be like, "I don't know what I just walked into," but everyone has questions. Everyone's already ready to go. That could be cool. All right, guys. Anything else?
Oh, so
And
much.
yeah, I love the participation. I love the questions. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Callie, you knocked it out of the park. You did a great job on this, and you can see you've opened up a lot of minds on this as far as pathways, as far as people want to continue that journey on there too. And we can forget that even that we're banging that regenerative drum, that we too have our own lens, and we have to pause before we exercise judgment on those who are not caught up with us yet. Albeit it can be so frustrating that you just want to bang your head against the wall. We all get it. We all get it. So, Tally, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. I love your brain, and I really appreciate you giving us your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. We'll see each other soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so
Bye for
much.
now. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Sage, for doing the amazing job you always do.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
You make
I
people feel
appreciate
very
you.
welcome, and yeah, and you're so good at thinking out the questions ahead of time. Yet you are being flexible with a mind like Tally's that just is so vast and so connected. But you were navigating that well between keeping on track, but then also offering her some space.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a moving target and
Yeah,
always good at it. So I appreciate that because some days are a little bit better than others. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate
you're
it.
welcome.
Bye, everyone. Rick, I
See you
hope you
next
enjoy
time.
your birthday. Thank you so much for coming on today. I hope it's wonderful.
Yeah, happy birthday.
All right. See y'all later, everyone.